Marcus Aurelius said, "What we do in life echoes through eternity." What is your life echoing through eternity? Welcome to Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey Skinner. Our mission is to inspire, engage, and encourage leaders from across the globe to plant missional churches and be servant leaders. So join us and hear the stories of servant leaders reverberating lives as God echoes them through eternity. Brought to you by Missional Church Planting and Leadership Development and Dynamic Church Planting International.
Welcome into Echoes Through Eternity. I am your host, Dr. Jeffrey D. Skinner. Welcome back in today. We are on part 4 of stepping into the new creation. We've been talking about centered set theology. Just a kind of quick recap here. First episode, if you have not heard it, was basically the parable of the sheep. And just to recap that right quick, there was some guys out in the outback. Their land, the terrain was just too varied, too steep, too violent for fences. And so they had to be creative in how they were to maintain their sheep and cattle and any type of livestock that you typically use fences to keep on their land and keep from wandering away. You need to figure out a way to do that. And so these American farmers heard that they had kind of discovered a way to keep the livestock on their land and weren't sure exactly how they did it. So they went to see it for themselves. And once they inquired as to how they did it, their response was, "We have figured out that if you dig the wells deep enough and keep the water fresh, and so that the water maintains its freshness, the livestock, the sheep, the cattle do not tend to wander far off the land. They may stray from time to time, but they always come home." And so using that as a metaphor for centered set theology and the new creation, so to speak, we have tended to think of Jesus as this rancher, so to speak, the good rancher, the good shepherd, and basically just kind of stood there watching over the gate and allowed people in, allowed people out. But the reality is in the biblical terms, the good shepherd is there protecting the flock. He's not holding the gate, closing the gate for people. All people are welcome in. Sheep are welcome in. It's not like he's preventing sheep from coming in, but he wants the wolves to stay out, right? And we've taken that to the point as pastors where we want to guard the gate, so to speak, or as parishioners, we want to guard the gate to prevent any nefarious people from coming in. If they don't quite agree with us, if they're somehow or another going to harm the flock, we're afraid that an ideology, a stray ideology is going to somehow enter into the community where we are pastoring, the community where we're serving, the community where we're attending there, then we have to be protective of that. And that's called bounded set theology, where it essentially becomes a litmus test, and we have inadvertently, and I'm not saying this was intentional or anyone's out there trying to be mean or rude, although there are times that when it can become that, but on its face, people do not necessarily call themselves being mean or rude when they practice a bounded set theology. And that comes from a mathematician, and I won't go into all the origins of it, but he just began to recognize that there was a bounded set of numbers and an unbounded set of numbers. And he began to apply that to his missionary experiences when his parents were missionaries, and he grew up as a missionary kid in India and just kind of has some heartburn over that. And so that's where he developed a centered set, where it said, look, it's not about who's in and who's out. It's not about identifying people based upon their ideology. If they agree with us or disagree with us, it's not a matter of, for example, if you come in to our congregation, you have to basically adhere to all of our rules and regulations. Again, this can be fundamental, it can be conservative, it can be liberal, it can be progressive. It's any ideology where you force someone to subscribe to that ideology in order to be considered part of your community there. That's bounded set. Centered set is where everything is directional. So we don't measure who's in and who's out. We measure who is walking in the direction of Jesus. And the more proximity, the closer the proximity we are to Jesus, the more we are in relationship to him, the more we look like him. The more we look like Jesus, it's not a matter of going out and telling others necessarily about Jesus. It's living lives where our lives intentionally, we're rubbing shoulders with people, and our proximity to others begins to rub off. Jesus begins to rub off on them. Our ways, the way of Jesus begins to rub off on them. That is centered set theology, where we're focused on the direction that people are moving. If people move away from Jesus, we don't kick them out. We don't say you're no longer part of the community. We encourage them to turn back in the direction of Christ, because that is the direction of abundant life. The bounded set is focused on survival. Bounded set is focused on self-preservation. Centered set is focused on Christ. Centered set puts Jesus at the center, where everyone's goal is to be more Christ-like, to be not just change your behavior, but be transformed into the likeness of Christ, to be a new creation. That is the point of centered set theology. So today we want to talk about fuzzy set theology. Now, fuzzy set, as the name suggests, involves the application of fuzzy logic to theological concepts. So now you may be wondering, what exactly is fuzzy logic? Well, it's a branch of mathematics, we're going back to math here, that deals with reasoning based on approximate or imprecise information. Fuzzy logic allows for degrees of truth, introducing the possibility of partial complexities of human experiences. So fuzzy set theology then, fuzzy logic is going to be less clear, as it implies. You may not necessarily know who's in or out. You may not know if it's against the rules or part of the rules. And so that's what fuzzy set theology is. And so in doing that, then this is another approach that people use as opposed to bounded set. Sometimes we'll go to the other side of it and go to this fuzzy set theology or fuzzy logic that looks for more nuances in their application of biblical truths. And you definitely find this more on the progressive side of the equation, progressive religious communities, liberal communities. You may think, if you've seen the Jesus Revolution movie, you might say that is kind of a fuzzy approach. They had kind of a fuzzy approach where it's just all about love, man. And the problem with that is, well, before we get into the problem, this takes the idea and applies it to our understanding of theological concepts, but it challenges our traditional binary approach of black and white. So it's not just either or thinking, it's not in or out thinking, but neither is it necessarily centered on Jesus. The problem with it is you don't know where it's centered. You don't necessarily know. It can seem loving. It can seem attractive because everybody just kind of belongs. And so it feels, in a way, it can feel like centered set theology, except that no one ever really defines what right is. No one ever really defines what truth is. No one ever really defines what the final goal is. Basically, every man, woman, child holds their own truth. And so if I say that this is a transformed life, then it is a transformed life. Well, the problem there comes in communicating to the rest of the community. It's more of almost a laissez-faire approach. Jesus had anything but a laissez-faire approach, a hands-off approach to the Christian faith or to the way. Christianity was not a term that was a compliment back during the Hebrew days. Jesus didn't set out to form a new religion. Jesus didn't set out to form Christianity. It became that, but really it became Christianity once it became attached to the Roman Empire. And we won't go into all that today, but you want to read a book on that, Brian Zahnd is an author out there, and he talks a lot about empires. Walter Brueggemann talks a lot about empire religion. So you can find those concepts and dig into that deeper if you want to hear that. But that's where Christianity evolved out of, was that. And that goes back to this black or white thinking here. So fuzzy theology, fuzzy logic can seem attractive because it seems more loving. Do whatever you want to do whatever is right in your own eyes. The problem with that is, there's got to be Jesus. There is a way. There is the way that Jesus said leads to abundant life. I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man comes to the Father except by me. That's Jesus Christ. So you've got to be moving in that direction of Jesus Christ. And if people don't understand where they're headed, if you don't have a goal in mind, you tend to just kind of wander around lost. And that's where people end up leaving the faith, or calling themselves Christian, calling themselves followers of Jesus, but not really living transformed lives. They may, for example, one may still, live in an open relationship, just to go for extremes here. Maybe they have an open marriage or something. Well, we call ourselves Christian and this is our truth and we're living our truth. We hear a lot of that today. This is my truth and I'm going to live my truth. Stepping into the new creation is not fuzzy. Stepping into the new creation results in a transformed life. And if it's not resulting in a transformed life, if you're not moving in the direction of Jesus, and if people don't understand what that paradigm looks like, they never know to be open to Jesus shaping that in them. And you can say, well, that it sounds like centered set is up to us. Well, it kind of is. It's not all up to Jesus. We have to make a decision. God doesn't reach down and just grab us and by the hair of the head and force us to be Christian. At least I don't believe it. It's not predetermined before time, as some theological traditions suggest. So if he's not going to force us to, then there has to be, we've got a free will, so there has to be decisions on our part. But it's not a one-time decision. It's an ongoing decision. So nobody's forcing us, bounding us inside the gate to keep us in. But simultaneously, we choose freely to remain in the presence of Jesus because the water is so fresh, because it feels so good and seems, and we're thriving. We're not just eking out existence. We're not just surviving. We're not just wondering from day to day what the next day holds, but we have the promise that regardless of what comes, tomorrow Jesus will be with us. That is the centered set theology versus the fuzzy set theology. It challenges us to, it can challenge us to move beyond the confines of certainty and engage thoughtful dialogue, but you can experience that same freedom inside of centered set theology. The problem, again, with fuzzy set is people need to know where the boundaries are. You got to know what abundant life looks like. You've got to know this behavior leads to abundant life. This behavior leads to death. And again, it's beyond behavior modification because we ourselves can't do it. It's only through transformation of the Holy Spirit can we live in that freedom from intentional sin. Not freedom from temptation, but freedom from intentional sin. Well, that wraps up another episode of Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey D. Skinner. And I'm hoping that our next episode will include an interview with a couple of friends of mine that have a brand new book out called Missional Reset. Missional theology is something that we talked a lot about in the last 10 or 15 years, but the reality is we've just taken words and kind of applied them over the top of an attractional theology or an attractional church model, which is like your mega church type. Everybody seeks to be the mega church, the popular pastor, so to speak. And Jesus really wasn't that popular. They crucified Jesus. So we are peculiar, and that is what we are called to be as Christians, as peculiar people, unique people. We are set apart for a unique purpose. That's what sanctified means. Sanctified, holy, and holiness was not a characteristic of God, but holiness is the character of God. God is wholly other, and that's what holiness means. So Missional Reset, we'll delve into a little bit about that, and that's what that book is about. It's available on Amazon if you'd like to go out and get it. But in the meantime, we ask that you would like and subscribe, share this with your friends. Again, we'd like to welcome our sponsors, Made for More, Jenna and Rigel Garcia, Drake Garcia, just awesome people. And they have a passion for helping you, people who are in ministry, begin to make money doing what they love, not exploit people, not exploit their gifts or anything like that, but simply do ministry, but simultaneously feed their family. So I encourage you to check out their website, madeformore.io. Thanks again for being here. Again, like and subscribe if you will, and pass this along to your friends. Have a great day. Bye. You can be a co-creator with God by helping to echo our guest voices. Share our episodes with friends and family and on your own social media accounts. Give us positive 5-star reviews. The more positive reviews we have, the more visibility we have, and the more voices that are echoed through eternity. We often invite guests who are serving faithfully year after year, often in anonymity in their respective roles in ministries. God sees them, and the reality is for a good kingdom leader, that's enough. We do not do what we do for the accolades of humanity. We do it because we're called by God. But I believe that God uses people like you and I to continue those reverberations and echo them throughout eternity. You can partner with God by liking, subscribing, and writing a quick positive 5-star review, and again, sharing those voices with friends and family and on your own social media accounts. Those reviews will eventually lead to other guests who have larger platforms that have more listeners, who will then in turn listen to the show. And again, it further echoes those voices, which is the whole vision of the Echoes Through Eternity podcast here, is to continue echoing those voices that God is echoing through eternity there.